No one is coming. I want you to hear that before anything else, because everything I say afterward will mean nothing if some part of you is still waiting for a different sentence than this one. No one is coming to explain why the diagnosis arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. No one is coming to tell you why the good ones are so often taken first, or why the sea keeps being beautiful on the same afternoon someone is drowning in it. I spent my whole life standing at that door, listening for an answer, and I want to tell you plainly, before we go any further, it does not open. I know, because I am writing to you from the doorstep, not from the other side. I never got to the other side. I stood there for 46 years, and that is where I died, still listening, so I am not going to comfort you. I have read too many letters written by men who claim to have heard something behind that door, and never actually stood close enough to check. I stood close enough, and I want to tell you exactly what I found there. In 3 moments of my life I have never fully told anyone, because between the 3 of them, you will find something you can actually use, not a comfort, something sturdier than that. Let me start where I actually started, not where the philosophy books start. I was raised by a woman who almost never spoke to me. My mother, Catherine, was partly deaf, could not read a word, and lived, I always felt, on perhaps 400 words a day. My father I never knew. He was killed at the Marne in the first months of the war meant to end all wars, before I was 1 year old. So for the whole of my childhood, in 3 small rooms, in a poor quarter of Algiers, I lived across the table from a silence I could not translate. She would sit by the window in the evening, after cleaning other people's houses all day, and look at the street, and say nothing, and I did not know, at 7 or 8 or 10, whether that silence was love, or simply exhaustion with nothing left over for me. So for the whole of my childhood, in 3 small rooms, in a poor quarter of Algiers, I lived across the table from a silence I could not translate. She would sit by the window in the evening, after cleaning other people's houses all day, and look at the street, and say nothing, and I did not know, at 7 or 8 or 10, whether that silence was love, or simply exhaustion with nothing left over for me. I know now it was both, and that they are not opposites. Here is the first real thing I learned, long before I could have put it into a sentence. I grew up inside a great, wordless devotion that never explained itself. So when I later encountered a universe that behaves in exactly the same way, present, enormous, indifferent to my need for it to mean something, I was not shocked by it the way other men were. I recognized it. Do not mistake this for a story about misery, because it is not one. We had almost nothing. No books, no money most weeks. A grandmother who kept a strip of leather for the days we misbehaved. But outside those 3 rooms there was the Mediterranean, and a sun in summer that flattened the whole city into white light and blue shadow, and none of it cost a single franc. I swam more hours of my childhood than I studied. Poverty was never a disaster for me, because it happened under a sky that gave itself away for free, and a man raised between poverty and the sun learned something most men spend a fortune trying to learn later, that the world, whatever else it withholds, is still there, still warm on the skin. That was the first lesson. Not that suffering is noble, that joy and hardship share a street, share a childhood. Nobody arranges it that way on purpose. It is simply how a life is built, and once you have seen it built that way, you stop expecting the 2 to arrive separately, like visitors who take turns. I was 17 when the second lesson found me, and it found me with considerably less patience. I was a goalkeeper before I was anything else, before a writer, before whatever they have decided to call me since. I have said, more than once and quite seriously, that everything I understand about duty, about what one man owes another, I learned standing between 2 posts on a gravel field in Algiers, not in a lecture hall. There is no lying on that field. The ball arrives from where it arrives, and your body must answer honestly, with no time to construct an excuse. Then, one week, I began coughing blood into a basin. It was tuberculosis, and in 1930 that word carried roughly the weight a death sentence carries. It ended the football permanently. And it informed me, at an age when every other boy believed himself indestructible, that I was very possibly going to die soon, and that nothing in the universe was under any obligation to comment on the matter. I lay in rooms listening to my own breathing, counting it, the way you might count a stranger's footsteps behind you at night. That is where I first met the thing I later spent my working life trying to describe honestly. I called it the absurd, and people have misunderstood the word ever since. So let me correct it once, plainly. It does not mean life is stupid, and it does not mean nothing matters. It means this: you need a reason, the way your lungs need air. It is not a weakness in you, it is simply the shape of being a person, and the world will not supply one. That gap, between the need and the silence, is the entire absurd. Not more than that. Every man who arrives at that gap believes he has found two doors out of it. One door is to stop living. There is a third way, harder to describe because it offers you nothing to hold except your own attention. You hold the silence without flinching and without decorating it, and you keep your life anyway, not out of denial, out of appetite. Because the moment I understood my time might be short, the water I drank tasted like something. Ordinary afternoons acquired a weight I could feel in my hands. There is no real love of life without a working knowledge of how briefly you keep it. That knowledge is not the thief of your joy. It is the price of it, and it is not too high. So if illness or a coffin you had to help carry, or a night you were genuinely not certain you would survive, has already brought you close to that door, you already possess something most people spend 80 years avoiding. It is not comfort. It is a tool. Pick it up, rather than set it down out of politeness. I might have stopped there, one lucid man, alone in front of a silent sky, drinking what remained of his life down to the bottom of the glass, except that the third lesson arrived, and it did not arrive for me alone. It corrected something I had gotten wrong in the first two. When France was occupied, I was in the mountains of central France, treating the same disease that had nearly finished me at 17. When the Allies landed in North Africa that November, and the crossing closed behind me, I found myself cut off from my wife, my mother, Algiers, the sun itself, for what became years, in a grey country that was not my own, watching an occupation I had not agreed to and could not undo alone. I later wrote a novel about a city sealed shut by plague, and people assumed the sealed city was a metaphor. Some of it was simply where I was living. It was there I understood the private lucidity I had built at 17 would not survive contact with what was happening around me. When the innocent are taken in the night by men who have decided their lives are negotiable, a man who merely stays awake and admires the absurdity of it is no longer being honest. He is hiding inside his own honesty. He owes the moment more than observation. So I did what a man with ruined lungs could do. I joined a resistance network and helped write and print an underground newspaper called Combat, work that would have ended with me against a wall if I had been caught. And I will admit that most of us were considerably more frightened, most nights, than the later accounts made it sound. But something in me changed permanently in that work, and it corrected my grammar, not only my politics. I had begun with the word I, one man, alone, facing a silent sky. In those years I learned that the instant a man says the word no, this cruelty I will not permit, not to me and not to the stranger beside me. He has stopped speaking only for himself. He has planted something he believes true for every person listening. I corrected my own earlier sentence, years later, into the one people remember. I rebel, therefore we exist. Not I think, alone in a room. We. The moment you refuse, on someone else's behalf, you discover you were never as alone in that silence as you believed. When I was given a prize in Stockholm for the writing that came out of those years, I said the work asked of any honest person comes down to two difficult commitments. Refuse to lie about what you know, and resist whatever is trying to crush the people around you. That is not a philosophy. It fits on an index card. I never found anything larger that was also still true. I should tell you how it ended, because I promised you honesty, and there is no honest way to soften this part. I died on a road in January, in a car, in an accident, the most ordinary and least meaningful way a man can die. In my coat, they found a train ticket for that same journey, which I had decided, at the last moment and for no important reason, not to use. The universe, to the very end, declined to arrange a fitting exit for the one man who had built a career, describing exactly how little arranging it does. I do not consider that cruel. I consider it exactly consistent. There was something else in the wreck, an unfinished manuscript, its pages stained with mud, about a poor boy in Algeria, and a mother who did not speak, and a father who existed only as a name and a fragment of shrapnel, kept in a tin box. After every argument I ever built, after the prize, after the newspaper, the last thing I was doing with my remaining time was going back, carefully, patiently, to 2 rooms and a woman at a window. If you want to know what a man genuinely believes, do not read his conclusions. Look at what he was writing when he was interrupted. So here, at the end, is everything I can honestly hand you. The silence is real, and nothing is coming through the roof to answer it. Not for you, and not for anyone you have lost. That does not point you toward despair, and it does not grant you permission to invent a comfortable lie either. It leaves you standing in front of one single day, empty, unexplained, and entirely available. Fill it anyway, not the important day somewhere off in your future. This one, the actual cup in your actual hand. The person across the table who has stopped mentioning what is wrong because they have decided you are tired of hearing it. Go on hearing it anyway. The work in front of you today, done properly, because no one is grading it. There is an old story about a man condemned to push a stone up a mountain forever, watching it roll back down each time, and beginning again. The gods who invented that punishment believed the worst thing they could do to a man was give him labor with no result. I have thought about that man for most of my life, and what interests me is not the climb, it is the walk back down, empty-handed, to fetch the stone again. That is the only part that actually belongs to him. He knows precisely what is coming. Nobody is lying to him about it. And he walks back down anyway, toward the stone, on his own legs, in the actual light. I have to imagine that man happy. Not because the stone got lighter, because he finally stopped waiting for someone to explain the mountain to him, and looked at it instead. Which, if you have ever stood on one at first light, you already know is worth the trouble by itself. Take the light while you have it. It was never mine to keep either. Yours, across the abyss. Albert Camus.